and the blood-soaked skies above Eastern Europe during World War II, one man would forge a legend written in fallen aircraft and shattered dreams. His name was Erich Alfred Hartmann, and before the guns fell silent, on May 8, 1945, he would become the deadliest fighter pilot in the history of aerial warfare. With 352 confirmed kills to his name, Hartmann's story reads like a dark chapter from the annals of human conflict, where death arrived on silent wings, and victory was measured in the twisted wreckage of enemy planes, scattered across frozen battlefields. Born on April 19, 1922, in the quiet town of Weissach near Stuttgart, young Erich could never have imagined the terrible path that lay ahead. His father Alfred, a respected physician, hoped his son would follow in his footsteps into the healing arts. But fate had other plans, and they involved not saving lives, but taking them with surgical precision from the cockpit of a Messerschmitt Bf-109 fighter aircraft. His mother Elizabeth, one of Germany's first licensed female pilots, would unknowingly plant the seeds of his future prowess by teaching him the fundamentals of flight through glider training. This early exposure to aviation would prove to be the foundation upon which one of history's most terrifying aerial predators would be built. The transformation from innocent youth to deadly hunter began in 1940 when 18-year-old Hartmann joined the Luftwaffe. 2 years of intensive training followed, during which instructors molded him into a precision killing machine capable of delivering death from altitudes of 30,000 feet or 9,144 meters. By 1942, he had completed his fighter pilot training and was posted to Jagdgeschwader 52, the 52nd Fighter Wing on the Eastern Front. This assignment would place him directly in the path of the most brutal and unforgiving theater of World War II, where Soviet and German forces clashed in the battles that consumed entire armies and painted the landscape with blood. Under the watchful eyes of the Luftwaffe's most experienced killers, Hartmann learned the deadly arts that would make him legendary. Veterans like Walter Krupinski became his mentors in murder, teaching him the stalk and ambush tactics that would soon terrorize Soviet pilots across hundreds of miles of contested airspace. These seasoned warriors understood that aerial combat was not about heroic dogfights or gentlemen's duels, but about becoming an efficient predator capable of striking without warning and disappearing before the enemy could react. They taught Hartmann to see enemy aircraft not as vessels carrying fellow human beings, but as targets to be eliminated with maximum efficiency and minimum risk. The young pilot's methodology was as cold and calculated as it was effective. Hartmann developed what he called the see, decide, attack, reverse technique, a systematic approach to aerial murder that allowed him to claim victim after victim with terrifying regularity. Unlike pilots who engaged in elaborate aerial duels, Hartmann preferred to strike from the shadows, approaching his targets undetected and unleashing devastating firepower at point-blank range of 66 feet or 20 meters. This technique served multiple purposes. It revealed his position only at the last possible moment, compensated for the relatively slow muzzle velocity of some weapon systems, allowed for accurate shot placement with minimal ammunition waste, and prevented enemy pilots from taking evasive action that might save their lives. The horror of Hartmann's approach became clear to anyone who witnessed his attacks. Coming out of the sun like an angel of death, he would close to extreme proximity before opening fire with his aircraft's 20mm MG-151 cannon or 30mm MK-108 weapons. The psychological impact on enemy pilots was devastating. Those fortunate enough to survive encounters with the Black Devil, as Soviet forces came to call him, reported feeling helpless against an opponent who seemed to materialize from nowhere and disappear just as quickly. His preferred hunting grounds were the vast expanses of the Eastern Front, where endless skies provided perfect cover for his predatory tactics. By October 29, 1943, Hartmann had claimed 148 enemy aircraft, earning him the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. But this was merely the beginning of a killing spree that would continue for another year and a half. On March 2, 1944, he was awarded the oak leaves to his Knight's Cross for destroying 202 enemy aircraft. 4 months later, the swords were added to his decoration for shooting down 268 aircraft. Finally, on August 25, 1944, Hartmann received Germany's highest military decoration, the Knight's Cross with oak leaves, swords, and diamonds, for achieving 301 aerial victories. The most terrifying demonstration of Hartmann's deadly efficiency occurred during a single day's operations when he achieved what military historians would later call his most astonishing feat. In 2 separate missions, the young killer managed to shoot down 11 Soviet aircraft, a massacre that left an entire squadron's worth of enemy pilots dead or missing. This achievement represented not just exceptional piloting skill, but a level of systematic killing that few human beings could accomplish while maintaining their sanity. Each victory meant another family somewhere in the Soviet Union would receive news that their son, husband, or father would never return home. Yet even the most skilled predator occasionally finds himself in mortal danger. On August 19, 1943, near the city of Stalino, now known as Donetsk, Hartmann's luck temporarily ran out. After a fierce aerial engagement, mechanical failure forced him to make an emergency landing deep in enemy territory, where Soviet ground forces quickly surrounded his downed aircraft. Demonstrating the same cunning that made him deadly in the air, Hartmann feigned injury when Red Army soldiers approached. They placed him on a stretcher and loaded him into a truck, bound for their headquarters, believing they had captured a wounded prisoner. But the hunter was far from finished. During transport, Hartmann waited for the perfect moment before attacking his lone guard, knocking the soldier unconscious and leaping from the moving vehicle. He disappeared into a field of tall sunflowers, using the cover to make his way back toward German lines. The escape was nearly fatal in an entirely different way. When Hartmann finally reached German positions, a sentry almost shot him dead, refusing to believe that this disheveled figure could be a Luftwaffe pilot rather than a Soviet infiltrator. Only quick thinking and desperate explanations saved him from being killed by his own forces. This harrowing experience only seemed to sharpen Hartmann's deadly edge. He returned to combat with renewed vigor, continuing his systematic destruction of Soviet aviation assets. His aircraft, a Messerschmitt Bf-109, painted with distinctive black tulip markings on the nose, became a symbol of terror across the Eastern Front. Soviet pilots learned to fear the sight of those markings, knowing they represented an encounter with death itself. Intelligence reports from captured Soviet airmen revealed that bounties had been placed on Hartmann's head, with promises of significant rewards for anyone who could bring down the Black Devil. The spring of 1944 brought Hartmann face to face with a new type of enemy when American forces launched bombing raids against Romanian oil fields. It was during one of these encounters that Hartmann demonstrated his lethality was not limited to Soviet aircraft. In a dramatic aerial battle, he managed to shoot down 2 American P-5, 1 Mustang fighters before fuel shortage forced him to abandon his own aircraft. The incident illustrated both his skill and the respect that existed between professional warriors. Reportedly, an American pilot saluted the falling German ace rather than attempting to attack him while he was vulnerable. As 1944 progressed into 1945, it became clear that Germany was fighting a losing battle. Yet Hartmann continued his deadly work, adding victory after victory to his already staggering total. On August 17, 1944, he officially became the highest-scoring ace of all time when he downed his 274th aircraft. By now, he had been summoned to meet Adolf Hitler himself at the Wolfslair headquarters in East Prussia. During this meeting, the German leader admitted to Hartmann that the war was lost, placing what little hope remained on experimental wonder weapons like the Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighter. The final chapter of Hartmann's wartime killing spree was written on May 8, 1945, the last day of the European War. At midday, as German forces prepared to surrender. Hartmann claimed his 352nd and final aerial victory. This last kill came mere hours before the guns fell silent across Europe, making him not only the deadliest fighter pilot in history, but also the final victor in the air war that had consumed the continent for nearly 6 years. His war record showed 1,404 combat missions, 825 separate aerial engagements, and a kill ratio that defied mathematical probability. But victory in the air did not translate to victory in the war, and Hartmann's fate was sealed when he and the remainder of Jagdgeschwader 52 surrendered to United States Army forces. Despite initial hopes that American captivity would mean reasonable treatment, the Yalta agreements dictated that airmen who had fought Soviet forces must be handed over directly to the Red Army. On May 14, 1945, Hartmann found himself transferred to Soviet custody, beginning what would become a 10-year nightmare of imprisonment and psychological torture. The Soviets had specific plans for their most valuable prisoner. They attempted to convert the ace pilot into a propaganda asset, offering him positions in the East German Air Force and trying to convince him to spy on fellow prisoners. When these efforts failed, they resorted to more direct methods of persuasion. Hartmann was subjected to 10 days of solitary confinement in a chamber measuring only 4 by 9 by 6 feet or 1.2 by 2.7 by 1.8 meters, sleeping on concrete floors while subsisting on bread and water. The psychological pressure was immense. Soviet interrogators threatened to kidnap and murder his wife, while keeping secret the tragic news that his infant son had died during his imprisonment. During one particularly brutal interrogation session regarding the Me-262 jet fighter, a Soviet officer struck Hartmann with a cane. The pilot's response was swift and violent. He attacked his interrogator with a chair, knocking the man unconscious. Expecting immediate execution, Hartmann was instead transferred back to solitary confinement, where he made a decision that would define the remainder of his captivity. Rather than submit to Soviet pressure, he chose to go on a hunger strike, preferring death by starvation to cooperation with his captors. The hunger strike lasted 4 days before Soviet guards began force-feeding their prisoner. This act of defiance established a pattern that would continue throughout Hartmann's decade of imprisonment. He consistently refused to sign statements written in German, despite being fluent in 5 languages, including Russian and Chinese. His resistance inspired other German prisoners, with even senior generals following the example set by the young ace, who seemed utterly indifferent to his own survival. Hartmann's imprisonment took him through various Soviet facilities, including camps in the Vologda region, where conditions ranged from hellish to merely miserable. At the Gryazovets camp, prisoners lived in relative comfort compared to other facilities, with opportunities for recreation, exercise, and even entertainment. Yet even in these improved conditions, Hartmann maintained his resistance, frequently finding himself in punishment cells due to his refusal to cooperate with camp authorities. The charges against Hartmann were as serious as they were disputed. Soviet prosecutors accused him of war crimes, specifically alleging that he had been involved in actions against Italian prisoners of war near Taganrog. Hartmann steadfastly denied these allegations, insisting he had never been stationed in that location and had never participated in any actions against prisoners. Nevertheless, a Soviet court sentenced him to 25 years of hard labor, a punishment that seemed designed more to break his spirit than to serve justice. During his long imprisonment, tragedy struck Hartmann's family in ways that his captors cruelly exploited. His son Erich Peter was born in 1945 but died at age 3 in 1948, with Hartmann never having had the opportunity to meet his child. This devastating loss was kept secret from the imprisoned pilot, adding another layer of psychological torture to his already unbearable situation. Soviet interrogators would later use threats against his family as leverage, attempting to force cooperation through emotional blackmail. The decade of imprisonment finally ended in 1955 when Hartmann was released as part of broader diplomatic negotiations between the Soviet Union and West Germany. His return to his homeland was both triumphant and tragic. Triumphant, because he had survived one of the most brutal prison systems in human history while maintaining his principles, but tragic, because of all he had lost during those 10 years of captivity. The world he returned to was vastly different from the one he had left, with Germany divided, cities rebuilt, and aviation technology advanced beyond recognition. Upon his return to West Germany, Hartmann faced the challenge of rebuilding a life that had been interrupted by a decade of imprisonment. At 33 years old, he was past the age when most men establish their careers. Yet his experience and knowledge made him a valuable asset to the newly formed West German Air Force. In 1956, he joined the Bundeswehr as part of Germany's rearmament program, reuniting with former comrades like Walter Krupinski and Gert Barkhorn, who had also survived the war and its aftermath. Hartmann's post-war military career saw him take on various roles within the reconstituted Luftwaffe. He became the first Geschwaderkommodor of Jagdgeschwader 71 Richthofen, commanding West Germany's first all-jet fighter unit from June 6, 1959 to May 29, 1962. This unit was initially equipped with Canadair Sabre fighters and later transitioned to Lockheed F-104 Starfighter aircraft. The irony was not lost on observers that the man who had once been one of Germany's most feared enemies was now helping to defend Western Europe against potential Soviet aggression. His training on American equipment required several trips to the United States, where former enemies became allies in the context of Cold War politics. At Luke Air Force Base in Arizona, Hartmann and other former Luftwaffe pilots underwent 60 days of training on Republic F-8 4 Thunderjet fighters, logging 33 hours in Lockheed T-33 trainers and 47 hours in F-8 4F Thunderstreak aircraft. The adaptation was relatively straightforward for pilots of their caliber, requiring primarily familiarization rather than fundamental retraining. However, Hartmann's post-war career was not without controversy. He developed strong opinions about aircraft procurement for the new German Air Force, particularly regarding the Lockheed F-104 Starfighter. Based on his extensive combat experience and technical knowledge, Hartmann considered the F-104 to be fundamentally flawed and unsafe for German operational requirements. His criticism proved prophetic when the aircraft's service record with the German Air Force resulted in 269 crashes and 116 pilot deaths in non-combat missions, along with allegations of bribery that culminated in the Lockheed scandal. Hartmann's outspoken criticism of the F-104 and his clashes with superiors over aircraft procurement policies ultimately led to his early retirement from the Bundeswehr in 1970. His concerns about pilot safety and aircraft suitability were vindicated by subsequent events, but his willingness to challenge official decisions made him unpopular with higher command. This forced retirement marked the end of his military career, though he continued to serve aviation in other capacities. From 1971 to 1974, Hartmann worked as a civilian flight instructor in Hangelar near Bonn, passing on his knowledge and experience to a new generation of pilots. He also participated in fly-ins with other wartime veterans, maintaining connections with the small fraternity of survivors from the world's most destructive conflict. These gatherings served both social and historical purposes, preserving first-hand accounts of aerial combat during World War II. The final years of Hartmann's life were marked by increasing recognition of his unique place in aviation history. While his wartime service remained controversial due to the political context in which it occurred, there was no disputing his technical skill and professional competence as a fighter pilot. Aviation historians and enthusiasts studied his tactics and methodology, seeking to understand how one man could achieve such extraordinary success in aerial combat while surviving the war himself. On September 20, 1993, Erich Hartmann, died at age 71 in Weil im Schönbuch, bringing to a close one of the most remarkable and controversial careers in aviation history. His death marked the passing of an era, as the generation that had fought in the skies over Europe during World War II gradually succumbed to age and illness. In death, as in life, Hartmann remained a figure who defied simple categorization, simultaneously a skilled professional pilot and a participant in one of history's most destructive conflicts. The epilogue. To Hartmann's story came in 1997 when Russia posthumously cleared all charges against him, officially acknowledging that the war crimes allegations had been false. This vindication came too late for Hartmann to enjoy, but it provided closure for his family and supporters who had maintained his innocence throughout the decades following his imprisonment. The acknowledgement also highlighted the complex nature of justice in the aftermath of global conflict, where political considerations often overshadowed legal facts. Mabry. In 2016, Hartmann's former Air Force unit, Jägerschwader 71, honored his memory by applying his distinctive tulip color scheme to their aircraft. This gesture served as recognition of his contributions to German aviation and his role in establishing the post-war Luftwaffe. The black tulip markings that had once struck terror into the hearts of enemy pilots were transformed into a symbol of remembrance and professional excellence. Today, Erich Hartmann's legacy remains complex and multifaceted. His record of 352 aerial victories stands as an achievement unlikely ever to be equaled, given the nature of modern aerial warfare and the technological changes that have transformed military aviation. His tactical innovations, particularly the see-decide attack reverse methodology, continue to influence fighter pilot training and combat doctrine. Yet this technical legacy cannot be separated from the historical context in which it was achieved, a context that involved participation in a war of aggression and the systematic destruction of human life on an unprecedented scale. The story of Erich Hartmann serves as a reminder of the human capacity for both extraordinary achievement and participation in historical tragedy. His technical skill as a pilot was undeniable. His survival of Soviet imprisonment demonstrated remarkable personal resilience, and his post-war contributions to German aviation were significant. Yet these accomplishments occurred within the framework of World War II, a conflict that cost millions of lives and reshaped the global order. Understanding Hartmann's story requires grappling with these contradictions and recognizing that individual human beings can embody both admirable qualities and participation in larger historical tragedies. In the end, Erich Hartmann remains what he was throughout his life, a figure who defies simple moral categorization while embodying the complex realities of warfare, survival, and human achievement under extreme circumstances. His story serves as both a testament to individual skill and determination and a reminder of the terrible costs of global conflict. The skies above Eastern Europe that once echoed with the roar of his Messerschmitt's engine now know only peace. But the memory of the Black Devil and his 352 victories continues to fascinate and trouble those who study the darkest chapters in human aviation history.